Hey guys, Brian Hilliard here, author of the best-selling book Networking Like a Pro and creator of the popular program How to Get Higher Paying Coaching Clients Without Being Pushy. And as you can tell here, I'm actually on the road. Just did a presentation a little while back, and I figured I would knock this out real quick because this was something that, it was in my mind. It was something I was kind of woke up this morning. I was like, I really need to talk about this idea of tire kickers, okay? And what I want to do is I want to talk about 3 ways that you can tell that you're talking to a tire kicker, and hopefully these are things that can help you avoid as a coach talking to a bunch of tire kickers. I know for me that's the bane of my existence. Certainly when I was kind of get started, for me, I was trying to get started and working with clients who could afford my rates, right? Obviously. And a lot of times what was happening was I was running into people, I was talking to them, they were, taking notes and writing stuff down and doing all of this good stuff. And then they would be like, oh, you know what? You're great, but I can't afford you. And that's not necessarily a tire kicker. Saying that they can't afford you isn't necessarily a tire kicker, but the type of tire kickers that you've seen out there, I'm sure, are the ones who are just taking all of your information, picking your brain, doing all the stuff, and then not really ever, when it comes to the money part, obviously reciprocating. And to be honest, that's why I started doing a lot of work with coaches and consultants to help them build an audience and get higher paying coaching clients without being pushy. Because a lot of times I ran into people who were really good at what they're good at. They had a strong commitment and a world-class training, but they just didn't have a process or any tools to be able to help attract prospects who could actually afford their rates. So what I do is put together a step-by-step game plan to help coaches and consultants get higher paying coaching clients without being pushy, salesy, or otherwise over the top. So, like I said, 3 ways to kind of help you, when you know that you're talking to a tire kicker, to help you kind of avoid that, kind of some telltale signs, and hopefully, like I said, so that you don't spend a bunch of time, and you don't be rude. Okay, so this is not, oh, well, these are ways once you figure it out, just, gotta go. But just so that you're not spending a ton of time wasting your time on people who are not going to buy. All right, now, one way that you can tell that you're talking to a tire kicker is actually pretty straightforward. You can tell that you're talking to a tire kicker when the person in question doesn't seem like they're emotionally vested in what you're saying. So like, for example, I talk, as you know, about marketing and client acquisition and stuff like that. And if I'm talking to somebody, they should, if they're a prospective client, be like, boy, you know what? That really, really sounds good. And it's not like where they're just running and, getting their checkbook out, but they identify and they emotionalize with, and stay with me on this, with the problem that you can conceptually solve for them. So if you're a life coach, what's the conceptual problem that you can solve? Well, help them get peace of mind. All right. So if you're a life coach talking to somebody who's not fired up about, at least it doesn't seem emotionally vested in the idea of getting that peace of mind for their, peace of mind in their life. Okay. Then you're probably not talking to the right person. And that doesn't make them a tire kicker, but when you consistently give them more and more information and they're just taking all kinds of notes and stuff like that, unless you like coaching for free, which is fine. That's fine. Okay, but you're probably talking to a tire kicker. So point number 1, if you find yourself talking to somebody who is not emotionally invested in the problem that you can help them solve. Point number 1. Point number 2 is also pretty straightforward. This one has to do, this is a little bit more confusing, but once you understand it, it makes a lot of sense. This has to do with the questions that people are asking you. All right, so let me kind of unpack this a little bit. Tire kickers, or people who are not going to be able to buy, or whatever you want to call them, they usually will do one of 2 things. They'll either ask a ton of questions, just like question after question after question after question, right? Picking your brain, which is one thing. And or the questions that they ask are not buying related. And that's interesting, okay? So the first part's pretty straightforward. It's a volume thing. Second part, though, not buying related. What do you mean by that, Brian? Well, what I mean is that they're not buying questions. They're questions that, what are buying questions? Buying questions are, tell me a little bit more about your service. Buying questions are, okay, so how does this work exactly? Buying questions are, oh, interesting. All right, so again, tell me a little bit more about how you do it. Buying questions are not necessarily, and this is a confusing one, buying questions are not necessarily, okay, can I get a testimonial, or can you put me in touch with a reference? That's not a buying question. You would think it was, and I used to be like, oh, okay, this is great, let me go get you somebody. It's not a buying question. Either you want to do it or you don't. All right. Somebody telling you that they had a good experience with, you as a coach, that doesn't influence a lot of people. Testimonials do. Social proof does. But actually getting a reference? Most likely not. At least not in my experience. I think I'm like 1 for 9 in when people ask me that question, whether or not it actually works out. Okay? So buying questions are things like, oh, okay, well, how does this work? What is it that you do? Tell me a little bit more about how it would work if we were to do some of this. Maybe a little bit about, tell me some of your, they might ask you more questions and deep dive into their own experience. Tell me, do you think this would work with me? So they might even ask you specific questions. Have you done some of this before? And these are buying questions, okay, versus just a ton of questions that may or may not actually work. All right, and then the third reason, or the third thing that if you're dealing with a, if you're dealing with a tire kicker or not, is that a lot of times the calls and or the meetings, you either have too many of them or they run too long than normal. Right? Why? Because they're asking you tons of questions, because you're answering all this stuff, because you're probably doing free coaching, because they want to talk some more, because they want to think about it. In my experience, people who have a problem and that use and recognize you as a solution want to move. Now, there's different personalities for different people. I totally get that. But what happens is you either get people who said, listen, you know what, let's do this right now, or, give me a couple of days and I'll think about it, but I'm really thinking about moving in this direction. If somebody says they want to think about it a little bit, you don't have a problem with that. You say, not a problem. Does it sound like the budget works for you? And you're just trying to think about, how you can make that work. Does it sound like the content works for you? So get pinned down on what they are actually thinking about. If they can't give you an answer on that, then they're not thinking about anything. You say, hey, listen, I had somebody do that. I was like, okay, well, listen, are you leaning one way or another? I give people 2 or 3 choices, usually 2. I said, are you leaning one way or another? And the woman was like, well, I have no idea. I'm like, okay, well, then you're not going to sign on. Because if I've talked with you for 20 or 30 minutes and I've made a connection and identified the problem and we've talked and done some good stuff, and at the end of that you're still telling me that you have no idea which offer works for you or your budget, well, then you were tire kicking, and that's fine. I have no more time to spend with you. Conversely, I was talking with a young lady the other day, and she's like, yeah, let me just spend a little time thinking about this. I said, no problem. Are you thinking about this one or that one? She's like, I really don't know. And then I said, okay, no problem. But I said, does it sound like you're just trying to figure out whether you do the, it was a workshop one-on-one or the small group? She's like, yeah, I'm definitely going to do one of them. The money is not a problem, but I just have to figure out what I think will work best for me. I'm going on vacation tomorrow, but I'll get back next week. Can we talk about it then? And I schedule some time down, put it on the calendar. That's not going to be a problem, okay? So you can tell those things. You can tell if people are not emotionally involved. You can tell whether or not they're asking too many questions, and you can tell if the meetings are taking too long. If any one of those things are happening, you're probably talking to a tire kicker, and that doesn't mean that you stop. It does mean, though, that you don't have to continue spending time with them, all right? So hopefully that makes sense. If you'd like, swing on by our Facebook group. I've got a book group out there. It's called How to Get Higher Paying Coaching Clients. You go over to Facebook, bing, bang, boom, put that in the search engine, and you will be good to go. In the Facebook search engine, click for groups. It's a free group, and you will be good to go. But in the meantime, my name is Brian Hilliard, saying so long, take care, and thanks so much for your time.